Why is far-right extremism on the rise in Britain? Well, I guess we can investigate maybe some of the things that are happening and talk about them, can't we? Before we start this, obviously, we don't support extremism, we don't support terrorism, we disavow it all, you shouldn't do it, you should engage in the democratic process like a normal person. Now that's clear. So let's just have a look at the state of play in Britain. In 2019, we saw our highest number of terror attacks. We had 4 far-right terror attacks in 2019. Not that many, I would say. There were 3 Islamist attacks in 2019, so this was considered to be significant for the first time ever.
Does it specify what it means by far-right terror attacks? Because I think we all kind of have an implicit idea in our mind when you hear something like an Islamic terror attack.
Yeah.
But what does a far-right terror attack constitute?
I guess what they really mean is nationalist terror attack.
Yeah.
It's hard to know, to be honest. They don't explicitly define, but we'll just go with the...
Take their word on it.
Yeah, we'll take their word on it and go for the basic assumption. But Britain was remarkable in 2019 because no other EU country had recorded more than 2 planned or attempted far-right terror attacks. And but the thing is, this is not actually that significant because the UK Counter-Terror Police said that of the 25 attack plots foiled since March 2017, 16 were Islamist and 8 were far-right and 1 was other.
I mean, none of that's particularly surprising to hear.
No, but the thing is, the reason this is important is because of the weighted percentages of the population. So about 3 or 4% of the population is Islamic, 70 or 80% of the population is native, and so for 70 odd percent or whatever it is, or twice as many attacks to be Islamist rather than far right.
And they are vastly disproportional to the population.
Exactly. And the Independent tell us, as of 31st of March that year, there were 238 people jailed for terror-related offences in the UK, of which 77% were Islamists and 18% were far-right extremists. Again, 77% of the country is not Muslim. Overall, Europol said that EU member states reported 119 terror attacks and plots in 2019. Of those, 57 were categorised as ethno-nationalist and separatist terrorism, all but 1 of which were in Northern Ireland. Irish nationalists. Irish ethno-nationalists.
Exactly the sort of place where you would kind of expect that kind of action to be taken.
Yeah. A further 26 were left-wing and anarchist terrorism, all in Greece, Italy and Spain, because they're riddled with communists. And they recorded 21 jihadi terror attacks and plots, which caused 10 deaths and 26 injuries. France had 7 of these. Britain had 1 of them, the Fishmonger's Hall one with the narwhal tusk, and 2 others that were thwarted. So it's, just to be clear, what we're saying here is that far-right terrorism and far-right extremism exists, but it is by far the largest problem that we have. And of course, you only get these kind of browbeating articles about far-right terrorism. You never get browbeating articles about communist terrorism or Islamist terrorism, which are also incredibly significant.
And when you get people pointing out Islamist terrorists, they suddenly get lumped into these far-right category, nebulous as that is.
Yeah, and there's a great deal of apologia that is pumped out by the BBC. And you get articles like this, fastest growing UK terror threat is from the far right.
I almost know exactly how they're going to justify fastest growing.
Well, yes, fastest growing is a very, is something of a weasel term. But Neil Bassau, the UK head of counter-terrorism, said that the 7 of the 22 plots foiled since March 2017 had been linked to the ideology. Okay, but what were the other, 14 or whatever it is? He said far-right terrorism had gone from 6% of the caseload to 10% of the caseload. It's small, but it's my fastest growing problem. So the BBC in the headline didn't put, it's a small problem. No, It's a fastest growing problem.
And that's how you always have to think about these things, sadly. Remember that if it goes from 1 to 2, that's 100% increase.
Precisely. It went from 2 to 4. 100% increase in far-right terrorism. Yeah, but it was 4.
Yeah.
It's not that much. But anyway, let's just talk about why far-right terrorism may be happening then. You've got radical extremists like Anjem Choudhury still in the country. I don't know why that person's here.
Was he not linked to Ali, the guy behind Amos?
He was, indeed. He was direct inspiration, apparently, according to that person's friends, Ali's friends, the most recent terror attack in Britain from an Islamist. Why is he still in this country? He's convicted of being a terrorist. For supporting ISIS. Why is he not deported? And it seems that a lot of far-right terrorists are saying things like this. We're allowing Muslim terrorists to live in this country. Why? I think that's a fair question. Dave Rich, the CSD's Director of Policy, told The Independent Chowdhury spent decades finding loopholes in our legislation that still haven't been closed. So why is he still here? This kind of permissiveness towards foreigners is, in my opinion, one of the things that is fueling far-right extremism and is also morally wrong.
Absolutely, you don't get this in countries outside of countries in Europe or that were founded by Europe. I mean, I'm reading through The Strange Death of Europe at the moment by Douglas Murray, and he points out how countries across the world who aren't of European descent or European don't put up with this kind of stuff.
Just deport a foreign terrorist.
So why should we?
Yeah, there's no reason at all. And I think that the fact that they're so permissive towards radicals like Chowdhury is one of the things that fuels far-right extremism. I think another thing that fuels far-right extremism is the lack of work and attention done on grooming gangs. These grooming gangs, if you can go to the next one, are mostly ethnically motivated from a genuine antipathy towards the sort of native English population by Muslim communities or elements of the Muslim community. And this is well known, well documented, as you can look at by simply observing the people who have been convicted for it. And yet, Tories and Rotherham Metropolitan Borough Council say they have been gathering intelligence over the last 6 months that suggests that girls and boys are still being groomed, trafficked, and raped. They say the information comes from a number of sources, including abuse survivors, youth workers, a member of the community, and concerned council workers. The group also claim that they have passed all of their intelligence onto the police who have failed to act, and the Labour-run council, which is committed to the idea that child sexual exploitation is part of Rotherham's past and not present. Of course, this was because back in 2014, Professor Alexis Jay did her assessment of it and found that at least 1,400 children had been sexually exploited in Rotherham between 1997 and 2013, so over sort of a 16-year period. And this is going on. Sarah Champion, the Labour MP for Rotherham, thinks that maybe up to 1 million English girls have been raped and trafficked because of these grooming gangs. These operate in more than 20 different cities around the country.
I mean, given the complete almost radio silence on talking about these things up until a few independent actors kind of blew the whistle on them.
Up until Lord Voldemort brought the thing to the
It would
fore.
not surprise me. I mean, what was the reason that most of the police officers gave? Was they were just worried about being called racist?
Yeah, a lot of them were worried about being called racist as well. The Labour government in the early 2000s also imposed new guidelines to imply that this was a lifestyle choice on behalf of the children who are being trafficked. Yeah, I know it's awful. It's genuinely
and
awful.
that does just remind me of the German Kentler case where it's like, we'll just fund these paedophiles looking after small children because these children were already prostitutes. It's a lifestyle choice.
Exactly. The report published today, the Conservative councillors say the exploitation may be occurring on the same scale of the past, but this cannot be known at the present because the information they have been able to gather has been poor. Rotherham needs to realise that organised criminal gangs don't just disappear overnight, and we need to be constantly working to get ahead of them and protect children. Every day that the council refuses to accept that there's a problem, children are being groomed, raped and trafficked. I would suggest that perhaps this also, again, showing distinct ethnic favour to certain minority groups that are in part, like in networks within these communities are committing these crimes, which are in part ethnically motivated. I think that probably fuels on far-right extremism. And I'm saying this because I don't want far-right extremism, but I also would like to see justice being done for people who are the victims of these gangs. If you don't want them doing it, maybe you should address some of the problems that are causing them to become radicalized. Because there's one thing saying, well, what about the Islamists? Well, they want an Islamic state. Are we going to accede to that? No, of course not. What about the communists? Well, they want full communism. Are we going to accede to that? No, of course not. But when it comes to, say, the illegal immigrants crossing the borders, or the Muslim rape gangs, or Anjem Chowdhury still being here, these are all things that it is right to address and would prevent further extremism. I mean, 20,000 illegal immigrants have come across the channel this year. 20,000 illegal immigrants. And what does Amnesty International? Well, they want us to change the way that these things are done to make it safer for these people to cross. It's like, no, they shouldn't be crossing at all. And if they do, they should be deported, obviously. They do point out that the number of crossings are facilitated by violent criminal gangs who are profiting from misery. Again, not the sort of thing that should be encouraged, is it? And this has prompted calls for the UK to provide safer and more secure routes for people wishing to reach the country. No, they should not be allowed because they're committing a crime. But then you just go on to the actual migration statistics. This is for August 2020. Because this is the latest statistics I can find, and they're staggering. Over the year, around 715,000 people moved to the UK to live here permanently.
Last year?
Last year.
This is one of those questions I always have. I thought we were in lockdown.
Yes. Even during COVID, 700,000 people moved here.
That's ridiculous.
400,000 people left.
Okay, so net
313,000 people
so once
for
again,
2020.
Enoch was being almost optimistic with his warning of 50,000 per year.
Well, he vastly understated the case. Again, not that I particularly support Enoch Powell, but like the point is the numbers are as the numbers are. Do we think that this is driving far-right radicalism?
I think you could make a certain case for it.
I think it certainly is, especially like taking the example of, what was his name, Vincent Fuller, him screaming, we need to get the immigrants out of England. Well, I do think that maybe the mass immigration has a connection to his view on immigrants generally. Maybe the grooming gangs have also got some connection to his view on immigrants generally. And again, there's no particular reason we should have immigration at this level. We are a very densely populated island. It's unbelievable that this is just allowed to continue. But as Migration Observatory at Oxford University points out, in 2019, immigrants, which is people born elsewhere, the size of the foreign-born population was 14% of the population of the country.
Well, I mean, if you've got hundreds of thousands of people coming in
every
year, that's no surprising. That's not surprising whatsoever.
In 2004, it was 5.3 million, and in 2019, it's 9.5 million. And they're just the ones we know about, of course. 38% of these migrants are born in the EU, so most of them were not born in the EU, so most of them are from very different cultures to our own. And half of them are located in London and the southeast. You can scroll down a bit. There's a graph that I'd like to see. Just go down a bit more. There's about location. There's one about location that I just want to show. If we can keep going down. There we go. Right, this one. Right. So you can see the regions that they're in. Obviously, London, 35%. Right, that was in 2005. The one on the right is 2019. And you can see that London is still only 37%. But look at all of the rest of the areas of the country, double or triple the number of immigrants there. And so you can see that this is not just something that is localized to London and the southeast, even though most of them are there. This is something that is being spread across the country. So it's not that the regular people of the country aren't going to see a large number of immigrants in their local area.
Yeah.
Again,
it kind of reminds me of what Murray talks about in Strange Death of Europe, where he said that during the when the migrants were coming up through Italy and Greece and all of the southern border countries of the EU, they would just get told like, it would be much better for you if you went up to Sweden or Norway or something like that. And it makes me think, is that what people in London are doing? Oh, why don't you move to Manchester instead?
Entirely possibly. And I'm absolutely convinced that this sort of these government policies that is driving the growth of far-right radicalism. And so I think to prevent the growth of far-right radicalism, you could stop these policies because they're not even sensible policies. It is not sensible to have hundreds of thousands of new people coming to live here every year. It is not sensible to allow grooming gangs to continue raping children. It is not sensible to leave terrorists in the country. It's not moral either. And so anyway, the thing that spurred all of this off was Hope Not Hate doing a report on the towns at risk of far-right extremism. Places like Liverpool, apparently, are extreme. Liverpool is a radical left-wing area. What are you talking about? But Hope Not Hate researcher Chris Clark said, this doesn't mean these places will be automatically susceptible to far-right overtures, but the risk may have increased. So it's not even like there's, any solid data on all of this. There's an increased risk. Well, who says who? Well, on your opinion. Economic hardship can fuel community tensions, and these may be articulated through the election of far-right politicians, spikes in hate crime, or one-off flashpoints spiraling out of control. Maybe, but I'd just like to stop the amount of terrorism that happens. And
I would like to see the country they live in, if they think that Liverpool is at risk from electing far-right politicians.
I have no idea. You can see that, like, listed there, like Liverpool and like a bunch of other places. And it's like, yeah, okay, not likely. Not likely is my opinion. But the point is, this is a consequence of the UK government policies, in my opinion. Thanks for watching this clip from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. We broadcast live on lotuseaters.com at 1 p.m. UK time every weekday. And we also have loads more content that we don't put on YouTube, such as the memes and video comments from our community. Every week we also have new episodes of our regular series, Contemplations and Epochs. In Contemplations, Josh explores interesting and diverse topics, such as the science behind the need for fathers in the home, or why people believe in ghosts and the paranormal. In Epochs, Bo and I go on, often at length, about various events and periods in history that are particularly fascinating. We've just finished a 5-part mini-series on the 100 Years' War, which I particularly enjoyed right up until the end of it when, spoiler alert, the French won. Alongside our excellent team of in-house writers, we also commission articles from outside contributors, and silver and gold tier subscribers have access to an audio recording of each premium article, so you don't have to read it yourself. We interview various contemporary thinkers and entertainers, as well as host the recordings of our live events. We also have a series of premium video content on the site, which we think is particularly worthwhile, or we simply can't put on YouTube because their editorial policies prohibit reasonable discussion on the subject. Personally, I think the deep dives we've been doing into critical theory and critical race theory are most important, as we reveal the origins of intersectionality and the plan that the radical left has for our societies. We are funded almost exclusively by our subscribers, so if you'd like to join us in the work we're doing, head over to lotuseaters.com and we'll see you there.